Good morning, everyone. This is Amy Lemley with John Burton Advocates for Youth. Welcome to today's web seminar, Tax Credits Put Cash into Pockets of California's Most Vulnerable Transition Age Youth. We're delighted that you've made time today to be on today's web seminar. We're right at 10 o'clock, and per our usual custom, we're going to give people a minute or so more to join us, and then we'll get started. So thank you again for being here, and we will start in about a minute. All right. Again, thank you everyone for joining today's web seminar. We'd like to start a minute or two after the hour just to give everyone a chance to log on. We're very excited about today's topic, and so without further ado, let's jump right in. Today we're going to have a wonderful panel of presenters. Again, my name is Amy Lemley. I'm with John Burton Advocates for Youth. We're also so grateful today to be joined by Jason Montiel with the California Franchise Tax Board. Following Jason will be Eileen Mariano. Eileen has been an intern with our organization for the last couple months, and she's the primary author of the really exciting publication that we are releasing in conjunction with today's web seminar. So thank you, Eileen, for all your great work and for presenting today. Following Eileen will be Xavier Mountain. Xavier is a youth advocate here at John Burton Advocates for Youth. He was formerly in foster care, and he's going to really bring a firsthand perspective of what it's like to be a transition age youth facing the somewhat daunting task of thinking about your taxes. Following Xavier will be Susan Zimney with the California Department of Social Services. The California Department of Social Services oversees the care and supervision of over 60,000 children and youth in foster care. She's going to be bringing a perspective on some of the specific things that we can do regarding integrating this issue into our services for transition age youth in foster care. And then join us for the Q&A is Tricia Conti-Luque from the California Department of Community Services and Development, who is doing a lot of great work to expand access to the California EITC around the state. So again, a wonderful group of individuals to share this information today. For those of you who are having any issues logging on to today's web seminar, you see on the slide before you the call-in number and the access code, and then the audio, the fully recorded web seminar will be posted at the link on the slide, and the written publication is already actually posted at the link on the slide. The publication and the handout are also available. If you go into your control panel under handouts, you'll see there are two handouts. The first is a PDF of today's presentation if you want to print that out and write along, or if you just want to follow it. And the second is the full publication, which again is being released today. So the most interesting part of our conversations is often in the Q&A. So we do encourage you to please submit your questions as you have them. It's often hard to remember them at the end of the presentation, so just type them all in. I'll be here dutifully, recording them, sorting them, and we're going to answer as many as we can today. We're going to start today with a little background information on the EITC and really talk about how it fits into the larger topic of financial literacy and really completing your tax returns. We're also going to talk about the state versus federal EITC, the qualifying factors, as well as what free help is available. Then we're going to really drill down into transition age youth, because we all know transition age youth have a handful of special circumstances. We're going to look into immigrant youth, students, homeless youth, youth who may be temporarily placed in a juvenile hall facility, young people in foster care, joint custody. We're going to get to as many specific topics around transition age youth as possible. Then we're going to turn it over to Xavier to share his personal perspective. Again, the topic of taxes, it can feel scary, particularly for a young person who may not have the consistent support of an adult. So how do we bridge that topic? and then look at more resources, and then transition right into Q&A. But before we do that, the real catalyst, we have for the last 2 years been so fortunate to partner with the California Department of Community Services and Development and the California Franchise Tax Board to do outreach about the California EITC. We've always loved this program. This year, however, we are more excited than ever because in the budget that was adopted by the governor and the legislature in 2018, the California EITC underwent a very, very significant change. It was expanded so that individuals age 18 and over do not require a qualifying child between that ages 18 and 25. So previously, you could always benefit from the Callee ITC if you were 18 to 25 if you had a dependent child. But if you did not, there really wasn't anything there for you. So this has been massively expanded to transition age youth. And so now young people who are 18 to 25, who are not a custodial parent and do not have a dependent child, can now access this tremendous benefit. And that really blows the doors open to this extremely significant public benefit to literally millions of young people in California. So we are delighted to be able to have a state, to have a legislature, to have a governor who really gets the importance of addressing poverty in California and gets the importance of redistributing funds to the most vulnerable. But the truth is, we need you. Those of you who are on today's web seminar, you are the people who are going to take this information out to transition age youth. And so that's really what the point of today's web seminar is to excite you, to educate you, to implore you to please bring the information about the California EITC out to the transition age youth in your life. We know statewide there are over 3.8 million transition age youth in California, and the slide here just shows some of the vulnerable populations. College students, foster youth, young parents, homeless youth, young immigrants are another group. Young people in detention facilities are another group. They're struggling. They really haven't fully recovered, if you can believe it, from the 2008 recession. And so this kind of benefit can significantly impact them positively. Here on the next slide, you can see the first bar chart is the average income of a former foster youth at age 21, and the second bar is the median income for working undergraduate students. Now you can see from both of those numbers, 8,709 and 14,383, that those are very modest annual incomes. Both of those are below the poverty line. But when you look at what the California EITC and the federal EITC, when combined, can do, we can increase that income of a foster youth by 56% and over a third of an increase for your average college students. Now, of course, not every former foster youth is going to qualify for the full EITC, state and federal, and the same with the undergraduates. But this purpose of this is really just to illustrate, first, how little our vulnerable transition age youth are earning, and second, how much can be contributed by taking the time to have these conversations with transition age youth and to really encourage them to take the step to file their taxes. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason Montiel. Thank you, Jason, for being on today's web seminar. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you everyone for joining this call. I really appreciate you all taking time to learn more about Callee ITC, to learn about income taxes. A little background on myself: I work for the Franchise Tax Board, and that's the state department responsible for income taxes here in California. We're kind of like the mini IRS, but we handle state income taxes. And I've worked at FTB now for 4 years, and one of the things that's near and dear to my heart is the California Earned Income Tax Credit. I can tell you that it works. I've met people that receive the credit. It can absolutely change their lives for the better. And I'm just grateful that you're taking the time to learn about this so you can share the information about Callee ITC with the folks that you serve. You might only have a few minutes with them, but even if you tell them a little bit about filing their taxes and how they can be eligible for the cashback Callee ITC and the companion federal EITC, it can make a big difference in the lives of those that you serve. So with that in mind, I want to go ahead and jump in and begin with why should transition age youth care about tax returns? Like Amy mentioned, taxes are scary a little bit. I remember when I first filed my first returns, I did them by paper. I was afraid I was going to do something wrong. And so I understand people are nervous about taxes, but a little bit of background. Well, I'll jump right in. This year, state and federal tax returns are due on April 15th. We call it Tax Day. You probably heard about it before, but it's instead of last year, it was April 17th. This year, it's April 15th. Who can file? Well, anyone with an income can file. And when we talk a little bit more, we'll find out that if you have any income, you might want to consider filing. Because by filing, you can claim a refund and possibly the valuable cashback state and federal earned income tax credits. Now, you can use your refund. Those who you serve can use their refund to pay bills, rent, tuition, if they're in school, any expenses. And the California Earned Income Tax Credit was created in 2015 by the governor and legislature, as Amy mentioned, as a way to fight poverty, to help those who are working by providing a little bit extra, in some cases, a lot extra, to help them make ends meet. The big message that we have is if you don't file, if those you serve, if they don't file, they can't get their refund or the Callee ITC or the federal EITC. So it's really important for folks to file. Next slide, please. So there's always the question of who must file. Now, this is a complex chart here, but I want to draw your attention to just the numbers in the box here, where we talk about who must file. If your filing status is single, and many of the transition age youth will probably be, when they will file single. If they have a gross income of $17,693 or more, they need to file. If they have one dependent and are filing single, if they have an income of $29,926, they need to file. And that's just according to the tax code, what folks need to do. But as we talk a little bit about Callee ITCs, you'll realize that Callee ITC and the federal EITC, you'll realize that people benefit even if they don't have a filing requirement. So one of the things I want to share is that if you have clients that earn less than these amounts, you still want to encourage them to file. Next slide, please. And so this slide sort of summarizes it really well. If you don't have a filing requirement, that's okay. Consider filing returns anyway for a couple of reasons. If they worked and had withholding taken out, they might have a refund coming. And also, they may qualify for Callee ITC and federal EITC. And so if they don't file, they might be leaving this valuable money on the table. And we all know that every dollar counts. Looking at the slide that Amy presented a little earlier about how much Callee ITC and federal EITC can help low-income transition age youth, it's really important to try to connect them with every dollar possible. Next slide, please. So I want to back up a little bit because some of your clients, some of those you serve, the transition age youth, may have some basic questions such as, what is a tax refund? Well, basically, if they have a job, they're likely to pay taxes during the course of the year, and that's called withholding. And if they had too much withheld during the year, they may be due a refund. And then so if you file your state and federal taxes, you may be able to claim two refunds, one from the federal side and then one from the state side. Next slide. Now we talked a little bit about refunds. Let's talk about earned income tax credits, or EITCs. The cashback state and federal earned income tax credits, they work in similar ways. They're both designed to help low-income taxpayers. And they basically reward people for working. And the end result is that they can put extra money in your pockets on top of your refund. The federal EITC, that's been around for decades, but California, the governor and the legislature created Kali ITC in 2015 as a supplement to the federal EITC. So it's pretty much brand new. It's only been around this is our 4th season, and we're still getting the word out to people about the credit. Next slide. So what's new with Callee ITC? Well, as Amy mentioned, it has undergone a big expansion for tax year 2018. It's worth repeating. It basically got a lot easier for young adults, including transition age youth, to qualify, as well as seniors. The age threshold lowered to 18 and opened up to those 65 and over, even if they have no dependents. And in the past, you could qualify if you had dependents, but the door has been opened to those who do not have dependents to receive the credit. Looking back in history, in tax year 2017, the credit was limited to those age 25 up to 65 unless they had dependents. Bottom line is, things have really opened up. A lot more people are going to be eligible. Next slide. And just to summarize, the expansion opens the door to young adults transitioning from foster care, young adults in college, and seniors 65 and over who do not have dependents. Next slide. Now, as far as what's new with Kali ITC, for tax year 2018, and these are the returns that people are going to be filing this tax season as of right now, Kali ITC expanded so the income threshold went up. So if folks made $24,950 or less, they may qualify for the credit. And that's up a pretty good amount from the previous year where the upper income threshold, the limit was about $22,300. So they can make a little more and still qualify for Kali ITC. Well, another important thing is that for the second year in a row, self-employment income can be used to qualify. If they had a business or they worked as an independent contractor, they earn those 1099 documents at the end of the year, they can use that income to qualify. And that's in addition to W-2 income. And W-2 income is basically what if a youth worked as a barista at Starbucks, they would at the end of the year get a W-2 from Starbucks. And so those different kinds of income can now both be used to qualify for the credit. Next slide. Now, qualifying for Kali ITC, we talked a little bit earlier about how many people don't have a filing requirement, and we want them to file anyway because they may qualify for Kali ITC. And this slide really is a good example. If we look at this at the column with the header of California maximum income, if I have no dependents, no children, and I have income of $16,750 or less, I may qualify for Kali ITC. If I have one dependent or more, one child or more, and I earn $24,950 or less, I may qualify for Callee ITC. And you can see in the columns to the right how much Callee ITC you can receive depending on whether or not you have dependents or if you have children. And you can see it adds up pretty quickly. Next slide. So there are a few things you need in addition to certain requirements of income and number of dependents that determine whether or not you qualify for Callee ITC. And those things include, you need a social security number valid for work. You need to have lived in California for more than half of the tax year. And you can use any of the filing statuses except for married, registered domestic partner, filing separate. Filing status. So if you're filing single or head of household or the other filing statuses, you can use that to qualify, but not married RDP filing separate. Next slide. So we often get this question, okay, well, this all sounds really interesting. How many families are eligible for Callee ITC? Well, with the expansion in tax year 2018, it means an additional 1 million families are eligible for Callee ITC, and a family can be an individual as well. So in total, about 3 million families could receive Callee ITC this tax season, and that is amazing. We're really excited about this expansion, and that's why we're working so hard to get the word out. When we have 3 million families who can benefit, we're just trying to connect them with the information they need to claim the credit. Next slide. And looking back at the last tax year that we have data for, which was tax year 2017, about 1.5 million Callee ITC credits were issued in California, for a total of nearly $347 million went out all around the state for an average credit of $236. And this data is as of Halloween of last year. But it just goes to show lots of folks are receiving the credit, but we want to help connect even more people. This is every dollar counts. And so just wanted to share this number. It's a lot of money. Next slide. Now, because I mentioned a little bit earlier that Callee ITC is designed to be a supplement to the federal EITC. And so I don't want to neglect the federal EITC. For tax year 2018, taxpayers may qualify for the federal EITC if they have a total income of $54,883 or less. If you qualify for, a thing to keep in mind is if you qualify for the California Earned Income Tax Credit, you almost always qualify for the federal Earned Income Tax Credit. Next slide. So we get the question of, well, how many people in California have received the federal EITC? And the numbers here are also impressive. For the last tax year, about 2.8 million EITC credits were issued all around California for a total of $6.6 billion. The average credit, $2,364. Next slide. Just to sort of summarize a little bit to kind of give you an idea of how the credits can work together. The average Callee ITC credit, $236. Again, it's a supplement to the federal EITC. When we go down to the federal EITC, the average credit is $2,364 for a total of $2,600. And that's a taxpayer, a transition age youth can earn that on top of any other refund that they might have coming. Now, one of the things, those are the averages. One of the things we do like to mention is that the maximum that you can get between the two credits, between the federal EITC and Callee ITC, is $6,700. It's a pretty narrow window for that, and that's why we choose to really emphasize the averages, but you can see it does add up quickly. Next slide. A few other things that transition age youth need to know that, and I mentioned this earlier, but it's worth repeating. Callee ITC can be claimed using both W-2 income and self-employment income. And one of the things you want to keep in mind is that to maximize your refund, when you file your taxes, you want to go ahead after you're done with your taxes, maybe keep a folder with all your documentation that you use to claim the credit to file your return, your W-2s, any other paperwork. Don't throw it out. Keep it in a folder because there's a chance that FTB may ask for it in order to validate your claim. Next slide. If FTB reaches out to you, and I know it's probably when you get a letter from the FTB, it's probably the last thing that you want to open. But if you get a letter from the FTB, it doesn't necessarily mean anything's wrong. It just means that we have a question about your return and want to verify some information. We will sometimes send out an FTB 4502, additional documentation required refund pending. It's a long name, but it really means that we just want to reach out to you to double check some of the information on your return. And the letter, if we send it, will be on FTB letterhead. And if you look at the slide, it has our logo and our address, and it looks a little bit like the slide here. So if you get a letter from us, you definitely want to open it. Next slide. And again, if we do send a letter, FTB is really just trying to verify that the taxpayer is indeed qualified to receive the credit. If we need to reach out to you, we'll send any letter to you within 30 days of your return being filed. And probably the most important thing is that we need you to respond before any Callee ITC can be issued. And each letter will have a phone number on it. You're welcome to call in, especially these days when people send fraudulent letters and things like that. If you have any question about a letter you receive from FTB, always call us and we can verify that, yes, indeed, we did send it. And we can take care of, move things along to help you receive the credit and refund that you deserve. Next slide. Now, another thing to keep in mind that transition age youth will need to know is that if we reach out and the taxpayer has claimed any qualifying children, we may ask for Social Security numbers and other info about that child, just as part of the process of validating the return. And we want to help, we're taxpayers too, we want to help you receive the Callee ITC and the refund that you're due. We just sometimes need to validate some information. Next slide. Some other things, so we've gone through a lot of information. I know I've tossed out a lot of numbers, and don't expect you to memorize all this. But when you're talking to the folks that you serve, and you're talking about taxes, and maybe they say, "Wow, I'm a little bit, unsure about what to do next," you don't need to be a tax expert in order to file your returns. In fact, free tax prep is available to those earning $54,000 or less. So a lot of the people you serve will be eligible for something called the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program. And that provides help in communities, cities all around the country. But in California alone, there are about 1,000 locations for VITA sites. I'm a VITA volunteer myself. I'm certified as a VITA volunteer. They go through rigorous training. They're IRS certified, and they can do federal and state returns for free. All you have to do is find a location in your community, make an appointment, bring in your tax documents, your W-2 and interest statements or anything like that, and you go in and you meet a friendly volunteer and they do your taxes right on the spot. Often you're in and out within an hour, and your return is filed electronically, and so that your refund can arrive quickly. Now, if you're looking to find one of these free tax prep sites, we have a website, of course, and it's all about EITC. It's called calleeitcforme.org/getit, and this includes a map of California with little circles showing all the different VITA sites. You can find a VITA site, you click on it, and the location in your community. There's a phone number where you can make an appointment. It's really easy. We really encourage people to take advantage of it. And the free tax prep is actually available starting usually this year, the end of January, early February, and right up through tax day on April 15th. So calleeitcforme.org/getit. That's the website to go to. Next slide. I want to wrap things up a little here by just pointing out a couple things. So when you're talking to those who you serve, getting them interested in filing their returns, getting them excited about claiming their refund in any Callee ITC or federal EITC, please keep in mind that the IRS they've said that they're going to start accepting federal returns on the 28th of January, so next week. At FTB, we've been accepting state returns since the first part of the year, so they can go ahead and file. And tax day, again, is April 15th. So we encourage everyone to file by then. And that's really all I have. What I'd like to do now is turn things over to Eileen. And thanks for your time and thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Jason. I'm now going to go ahead and go over some specific situations about, again, eligibility and qualifying for the Callee ITC, but about some circumstances that might make filing taxes more difficult and how to overcome these barriers. So the first situation I'm going to talk about, we get a lot of questions about whether or not you can claim the Callee ITC if you are an immigrant. So the answer to that is you must have lived in the United States for more than half of the last tax year or the last calendar year. You must be either a citizen or resident alien, somebody with a green card, or married to a U.S. citizen or resident alien and filing jointly with that person. For those with DACA, if you have a social security number that allows for work, you can use that to claim the Callee ITC. In fact, you have to have a social security number in order to qualify for the Callee ITC. Next. So for students get so many different tax forms, tax-related forms, and sometimes it can be hard to determine what is taxable and what isn't. So we thought we would help just walk through a couple of the different financial documents that a student might get to help clarify. The first is what you'll see here, and it's a financial aid award letter. The example here is actually taken from an actual UC Berkeley letter. So it's a good example for us to kind of walk through. One number you'll see on here is this $32,168. That's the total cost for the student attending UC Berkeley that year. That number is broken up in the 3 lines above it. So the $1,230, the $12,972, the $17,966. Those together create the total cost for the student. You'll also see this line that says my gift aid, or the $24,261. That's the total amount of financial aid that the student is getting. And then this $7,907 under my net cost is the difference between that $32,000 and that $24,000. So the difference between the total cost to the student and the total aid to the student. Now the question is, what part of that total financial aid, my gift aid, is taxable? The answer is that aid used for books and supplies and tuition and fees is not considered taxable, whereas any aid that goes to living expenses is considered taxable. However, to determine what is taxable, you don't just go to the line here that says $17,966. So it's not the total living expenses that's listed on this award letter. Instead, what you would do is take the total gift aid, so the $24,261, and subtract the $1,230 and the $12,972, or subtract what is considered not taxable. And then that remaining number, that $10,059, that is what is taxable for the student. So again, this is going to be different for every student. This is just one example, but we hope that you can see here how to determine what is and is not taxable out of that total my gift aid. Next slide. Another form that students may get in the mail is the 1098-T. So we really encourage everybody to keep their 1098-T whenever they receive it during the year. And the 1098-T breaks down what a student paid for education, what they still owe, and then any scholarships that they've received. So there's 3 spots on this form that we want to bring your attention to. The first one is section 5, or what has the big black box around it. And that's, you'll see that it says $24,261. That's the total amount of financial aid, not including any loans that the student has received. You'll also notice that that $24,261 was taken from the last slide, or it was the same number that was under the my gift or my aid in the last slide. So that's how these 2 forms connect. That's what goes in section 5. And that's what you're then breaking down to consider what is taxable and what isn't. Also in section 1 is the amount that you paid, and it does not include anything from section 5. So that is just the total amount that that student has paid that year. And then section 2 is the total amount being charged. So in this example, you'll see there's the $32,168. Again, that was from the award letter, or the total cost to the student for that year. Next slide. Another form a student might get is a 1098-E, not to be confused with a 1098-T. But the 1098-E, a student will receive if they have a student loan, and they would get this from their lender. So in this case, they're getting it from America's Bank. And I want to draw your attention to box number 1. That is the total interest payments that year for the student. So in this example, it's $8,582. Now, if the student makes less than $80,000 and is paying off their student loans, then they can deduct $2,500 of that student loan interest from their total taxable income. So then they reduce their total taxable income for that tax year on their federal taxes. So in this example, the student would deduct $2,500 from the $8,582. Next slide. And what's great about this is this $2,500 deduction would be reported on line 33 of Form 1040 of your federal taxes. This would automatically fill in, but this is just an example to show you of where that deduction would show up on your federal tax return form. Also for students, we get a lot of questions about taxes and FAFSA. So if you are completing your taxes in February and then you're completing your FAFSA before May, once you've completed your taxes and you're going in to complete your FAFSA, you can use the IRS data retrieval tool, which is right on FAFSA.gov. And then your tax information will automatically autofill. This is if you've already filed your taxes. This is great because the income and all your tax information will automatically autofill instead of you having to do it by hand. And that will save you time and also prevent any errors. Also really important is that the Callee ITC, the tax credit does not impact your eligibility for FAFSA. So again, any money that you receive in that tax credit does not impact a student's eligibility for FAFSA. If you don't file your taxes, however, and you are completing FAFSA, you may have to demonstrate proof of being a non-filer. In order to do that, you would contact the IRS to receive that proof. But demonstrating that this proof of non-filer can be pretty tricky. As of this month, actually, there's a new rule with the IRS, which is that if you attempt to obtain proof of non-filing status and you are not able to do so, you can sign a statement that says that you tried to obtain that proof, but were not able to do so. However, the IRS has discretion to determine if that attempt was sufficient, and this whole process can delay your financial aid. So this is just another really good reason to file your taxes because it can make your financial aid process run more smoothly. Okay, so we just gave you a lot of information about students, and we wanted to now shift to homeless youth. One thing that might come up or a thought that might go through your head is, these homeless youth are really struggling to even meet their basic needs. Why should they be worrying about taxes? Well, even a small amount of tax credit can really make a difference in the lives of these homeless youth. But there can be a few barriers that they may face when it comes to filing their taxes. So we wanted to just address a couple of these. The first is one of the first things you're asked when filing your taxes is what's your address? And so as a homeless youth can use either a clinic, a shelter, or a drop-in center's address with permission from that organization so that they can fill out that first part of their tax forms. The second thing that when you're filling out your taxes is you will need a bank account. You might think you need a bank account in order to get a tax credit or a tax refund. And again, this could be a barrier that homeless youth may face when trying to fill out their taxes. However, there are a couple ways that they can still receive a tax refund or credit even without a bank account. The first is that they can take their tax refund check to Walmart. And then if they have a government issued ID, Walmart will cash that check for them. However, if they don't have a government issued ID, they still are able to receive a tax refund. What they can do is order a prepaid debit card before filing their taxes. NetSpend has a good option for this. So they can order that prepaid debit card, and then once they receive it, the debit card comes with the equivalent of a bank account and a routing number. So they can put these numbers on their taxes, and then when they receive their tax refunds, that money will automatically be loaded onto that prepaid debit card, and then they can use it for their expenses. Many young adults may be wondering how they can file their taxes from Juvenile Hall or from a juvenile detention facility. Some of these young adults may be in these facilities up to the age of 25. So one really important thing to remember is that you can claim the Callee ITC regardless of past convictions. Any wages earned while incarcerated do not count for the Callee ITC, but if they have any other wages, again, just an income of $1, then they can file their taxes and potentially receive this tax credit. There also is a new state legislation that requires youth in Juvenile Hall to access the internet for educational purposes. So this might help youth access the necessary tax forms. However, if they still can't get the tax forms that they need, they can have somebody bring these forms to you, or they can file for a tax extension while in a juvenile detention facility. And these tax extensions can allow for somebody to file taxes up until October 15th, if they then want to have a little more time in order to figure out how to file their taxes beyond the April 15th deadline. Next slide. Specifically for foster youth, so 2/3 of foster youth between the age of 18 and 21 live either in a SOAP or a THP plus FC, and they often might wonder what they should put as their filing status. Most of them, I think Jason mentioned this earlier, most of them could file as either single head of household or single. Just to quickly run through the requirements in order to be a single head of household, you have to be unmarried, pay more than half of the cost of keeping up your home for that past tax year, and also have a qualifying dependent who lived with you for more than half of that last tax year. So if a foster youth does not fall under those categories and does not qualify for single head of household, they likely will probably just file as single. Another really important thing for foster youth living in a SOAP or in a THP plus FC is that any stipends or infant supplement payments are not considered taxable income. So it's really important any payments that they're getting through these programs are not considered taxable when they're filing their taxes. There also might be questions about joint custody, and specifically if a youth shares custody of a child with another parent, who can claim the benefits associated with the child. The answer is that it has to be the custodial parent, which is first determined by the parent who the youth spends more days with in that last tax year. If the two parents share exactly equal custody, then the parent who is considered the custodial parent is the parent with the highest gross income. So again, then the parent with the highest gross income can be the one to claim the benefits associated with that child. Next slide. And then the last specific situation we're going to go over is what to do if you're being claimed by somebody else as a dependent. So if you're trying to file your taxes to claim the Kali ITC, if you do so electronically and you're claimed as a dependent by somebody else, you won't be able to file your taxes electronically. There's a couple ways that you could be legally a dependent of somebody else. The first is if you're that person's child, a student, and also receive more than half of your financial support that year from that taxpayer. Then you could be legally claimed as their dependent. Another way is if you're a relative and live with a taxpayer, you make less than $4,050 per year and also receive more than half of your financial support from that taxpayer. That's another way you could be legally claimed as a dependent. However, if you don't fall into one of those categories, and if you think that you're being claimed fraudulently as a dependent by somebody, in order to file your taxes, again, you won't be able to do it electronically. You won't be able to submit them. You should file your taxes by mail, and then call the IRS identity theft number, which is listed on this slide, and then the IRS will contact you and then the other fraudulent taxpayer in order to investigate the situation. Next slide. Okay, so that was a lot of great information on some specific situations. So what I'm going to do now is transition to some scenarios that will hopefully help you apply the information that you've learned to some what we hope are real life scenarios. Next slide. So the first scenario here, Brenda is a student. She is 23 years old. She has $4,000 of income per year from a part-time job. She also gets $12,000 in financial aid for tuition and $12,000 in financial aid for living expenses. she doesn't have any children. So if we just take a minute and think, is Brenda legally required to file taxes? If she did file taxes, would she be eligible for the Callee ITC? And if so, how much could she get from the Callee ITC? Well, let's find out. So Brenda is not legally required to file. And now the question is, how do we know that? Well, she has $4,000 of income from her job. That is taxable. She also has $12,000 of financial aid that is going to living expenses. If you add those together, then her total taxable income is $16,000. One key piece here is that the $12,000 of financial aid for tuition is not considered taxable income. So we don't add that in when we're trying to figure out Brenda's taxable income. Now that we know her taxable income is $16,000, we can recall back to Jason's slide, which was listed the mandated filing threshold for somebody that has no dependents, and that is $17,693. So Brenda's total taxable income is below that mandated filing threshold, which means that she doesn't have to legally file taxes. However, if Brenda does file taxes, she will qualify for the Callee ITC. Again, the maximum qualifying income for the Callee ITC is $16,750. So again, her taxable income is below that, which means she does qualify for the Callee ITC. So if she filed taxes, she could get up to $232 from the Callee ITC. Our next scenario is Joe. Joe is a foster youth. He's 19 years old. He's a part-time student and also has a part-time job where he earns $12,000 per year. He also gets $960 per month from SILT payments, and he has no children. So again, we'll think about if Joe is legally required to file taxes, if he does file taxes, if he's eligible for the Callee ITC, and if he is eligible for the Callee ITC, how much could he get from it? So if we think about Joe, again, Joe is not legally required to file taxes. So again, his taxable income is $12,000 per year from his part-time job. What is not included in taxable income is his monthly SILT payments. Again, those payments are not considered taxable. So his $12,000 of taxable income, just like Brenda, is below the $17,693, which is the mandated filing threshold. However, his total taxable income is also below the qualifying income for the Callee ITC, which means he would qualify for the Callee ITC if he filed taxes. And again, if Joe filed taxes and received the Callee ITC, he could get up to $232 from it, which would be a really important boost of supplemental income for Joe. And then the last scenario is Charlotte. Charlotte is 24 years old. She's unmarried. She has an income of $22,000 per year. She has one child who lives with her for the entire year. So again, we'll think about if she's required to file taxes, if she's eligible for the Callee ITC, and if so, how much would she get for it? Well, for Charlotte, she has $22,000 per year of taxable income, which is again below the mandated required filing threshold with one dependent. You'll notice that this number is higher than it was for Brenda and Joe because Charlotte has a dependent. So the $22,000 of taxable income that she earns per year is below the mandated filing threshold of one dependent. However, she is eligible for the Callee ITC. That $22,000 per year is below the maximum qualifying income for somebody that has one dependent. Again, this number is higher than it was for Brenda and Joe because Charlotte has one dependent. And so Charlotte's $22,000 of income does qualify her for the California EITC. And most importantly, if she did file taxes and claim the California EITC, she could receive up to $1,554 from the Callee ITC. And for a young parenting youth, this could be a really significant portion of income for her that she can use for any expenses. Next slide. Okay, so now that we've made it through our scenarios, we're going to hear about a youth's experience with the tax process. So one of our presenters, Xavier, is on the line now. I know Amy briefly introduced him at the start, but Xavier was formerly in foster care, and he is now getting his MSW at the University of Southern California and also works as a youth advocate. And he was very active in advocating for the expansion of the Cal Grant from 4 to 8 years for foster youth. So we're very excited that Xavier is willing to answer a few questions for us. And so Xavier, I would like to just ask you the first question here, which is, what is it like to file taxes as a youth?
I mean, as a youth, I mean, what are taxes is the question. Like, you come straight out of foster care, you know, being a dependent, not being guided to adulthood properly and transitioning very poorly. And the first question when you hear is, did you file taxes? You're wondering, what are those? So I had no clue what they were. So it was really just, I was confused and lost when I heard about taxes.
So you mentioned that you were confused and lost. What could have helped promote success in the tax filing process?
Definitely guidance in the process, or even possibly having to be more publicizing different workshops for youth to learn how to do those taxes. It definitely was beneficial for me at that time.
Thank you. And how could, if you had known how to file your taxes and had gone through that process, how could additional income from a tax credit have been beneficial for you?
Well, a couple of the simplest things are rent. It definitely would help out on rent so much, because at the time for me there was no there's AB 12, so that was for me. Car payments were definitely a thing because I still needed to transfer myself to school and to work. Food, and as well as different costs and bills. And it would have definitely benefited more as far as professionalism, because as I was transitioning into adulthood, I wanted to carry myself more professionally. But the problem with that, you're going to think about food and living expenses far before you think about a suit and a tie. And I definitely felt like that would have been beneficial, to have that extra income just to be able to present myself more professionally so I can advance myself in life.
Well, thank you so much for that perspective, Xavier. We really appreciate your guidance. Are there any final words or words of wisdom that you would have for everybody?
Well, I just want to say that to be able to allow youth from ages 18 and 24 to even qualify without a dependent, dependents, that $232 will make a big difference in many of these youth's lives on top of what they already have. Trust me.
Oh, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it. So now we're gonna shift into some specific strategies that we hope that everybody listening can use to help claim the Callee ITC. And we really hope that these are some action items that you can take away from this webinar and go implement. So next slide. So the first strategy is to print out JBay's Kali ITC publication. So that's linked here. It talks about the Kali ITC in general. It talks about filing requirements, how to file. It has information on the specific circumstance that we talked about in the webinar today. It also has a lot of additional helpful resources. The most important thing, though, is that it specifically has Tay as an audience. So it's written in a very comprehensive way so that Tay can understand taxes, the Kali ITC, and also we really hope that you will take the time to look through this, understand the material, and how beneficial this tax credit can really be. So again, it's linked to the slide here, and we hope that that's the first strategy you can take away from this webinar. The second strategy is to seek additional information about the Kali ITC and taxes. In addition to JBay's publication, the California Franchise Tax Board website has brochures and posters and a ton of additional information. You can contact Jason, whose email is on this slide here, for information about how to order any of these materials. They are free, and they come in a bunch of different languages: English, Spanish, Vietnamese, Korean, Mandarin, Russian, and so those are a great resource as well. Additionally, I have one more quick thing on strategy too. Additionally, the California Department of Community Services and Development also has is educating communities about the Kali ITC and about ways in which people can find and access free tax prep assistance. So again, their email is also on this slide if you would like more information about the wonderful services that they're providing. Strategy number 3 is to encourage TAE to collect financial documentation year-round. So one thing that we've noticed is that it can be really hard to keep financial documentation, and sometimes this documentation can be scattered. So really encouraging TAE to keep a folder with them all year and put things like W-2s, 1099s, pay stubs, 1098-Ts, their financial aid award letters, all in one place, so that then when it is time to file taxes, it's easier to, and they have all this information on hand. Another quick question that we sometimes get is, what do I do if I lost my W-2? And so we would encourage TAE to contact their employers if either contact the employer directly or through an HR department if they have one. However, if they're not able to contact their employer, or if the employer declines to give a W-2, then they can call the IRS to report that, and then also send in Form 4852, which is the substitute for the W-2 form, and then remind TAE that even if they've lost their W-2, they can still file their taxes despite not having that. Next slide. So strategy number 4, similar to helping TAE organize their financial documents, is to help them secure their personal documents. For instance, one obstacle that some may face when filing their taxes is not knowing their Social Security number. So you do need either a Social Security number or an ITIN in order to file taxes. You will only qualify with for the Kali ITC with a Social Security number, however. But if somebody has a Social Security number and they don't know it, then you should direct them to their local Social Security office with whatever personal documentation that they have. For foster youth specifically, they're given their personal information when transitioning out of foster care, so they might know their Social Security number. But if they don't, they can call the Ombudsman office. And just in general, helping TAE secure this personal information will be really crucial in making this tax filing process as smooth as possible. Next slide. So the 5th strategy is to dedicate time between January and April to file, to talk about filing taxes and to file taxes. So again, taxes can be filed anytime between the end of January and April 15th. So we would encourage you, many of you might have workshops about the FAFSA. Maybe you could add one that talks about filing taxes in the Kali ITC. Or during this time, anytime you have a check-in with transition age youth, consider making a financial check part of that conversation. We really just hope that the more that providers are able to talk about taxes, especially during tax season between February and April, the more TAE will understand the importance of the tax process and therefore file their taxes and qualify for the Callee ITC. Next slide. So strategy number 6 is to direct TAE to those free tax prep services. 2 really good ones are TurboTax and VITA sites. TurboTax is free if somebody's income is less than $33,000 per year. And the great thing about it is you can file online and you can file both your federal and your state taxes. So this can be a really great resource. But another really great resource is our VITA sites. And so again, at a VITA site, you can also file both your federal and state taxes. They are in person, and they open across the state right at the start of February. I think there's over 1,000 different sites throughout California. On this slide here, you'll see a website where you can find a VITA site that is close to you, and you can help direct Kay to those sites. And then one additional plug, if you also, it's too late to be a VITA site for this year, but definitely consider being a VITA site for next year just to make that service even more accessible to Tay. And then another strategy is to forward this all-county information notice to your colleagues. That's also linked here. And it was a way that the state communicated information about the changes to the Callee ITC to the different counties. It has a ton of great information. There's a brochure material, some tables about Kali ITC income limits, how to file tax return, locations for free tax help, a lot of what we've talked about in this webinar today. And it's in both English and Spanish. So again, forwarding that to your colleagues to just further increase awareness about the Kali ITC and filing taxes. And then for our final strategy, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Susan from the California Department of Social Services, so she can talk about strategy number 8.
All right, Susan, I'm not sure if you can hear us. We're having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. Okay, I think there's a lot of great information that that Susan and the Department of Social Services brought together. You know, very smart ways of integrating this. I think anyone who works directly with young people know you only get one bite at the apple often, and so how do you bring information and weave it into the existing continuum of services that you're offering? And a few of the great ideas that Susan and her team developed have to do with, one is the Transitional Independent Living Plan. Those of you who are involved with older youth in care, in foster care are aware of what the Transitional Independent Living Plan is. That does address topics of income, economic literacy, and then just to really use that as a tool to get the California EITC and tax completion as a part of that conversation. A second strategy, which is a state requirement regarding looking at a youth credit history. That was a piece of legislation that was passed several years ago, and so there is a requirement that young people in foster care have their credit history checked, and that is another, time when you're interfacing with young people about economic literacy, economic security, and so if you're looking for a touch point to talk about taxes, that is a natural place to include that. Another opportunity for integration is the child and family team and other team decision-making and the 90-day transition plan. Each of these are structures within our child welfare system. There's an opportunity to get this on the agenda and to make it a time and a place where this topic can be addressed. And then last but certainly not least is our fabulous, independent living skills programs across the state. And so these are programs that have historically addressed issues of older youth in care. Many, if not most of them, have standing workshops to complete the FAFSA. And so if you are an ILP representative or if you're from a county, I really encourage you to integrate it into your ILP program, to have a tax preparation workshop. Really ideally maybe a part 1, 2, and part 3. Part 1 could be the general concept, informing people what papers to bring. Part 2 could be them bringing the papers, logging on together to TurboTax. Again, if the income's less than $33,000, which I would imagine it would be for almost every non-minor dependent, and then to do that together. So I'm very sorry, Susan, that we weren't able to get the audio for you. Thank you so much for sharing this information and for presenting it. and we'll keep the conversation going. So right now we are going to present one more slide, and then we're going to turn to Q&A. One is just helpful resources. Throughout the presentation, we've referenced a lot of different resources. Are really excited about the publication that Eileen has written. It's a great compilation. Much of what was presented is in there, but there's a lot of information in there that we weren't able to include. So if you have a staff meeting, if you have your next unit meeting, if you have your next, time that you come together, just encourage you, print it out, pass it around. For those of us who love and think a lot about public benefits, we think about CalWorks, and we think about food stamps, and we think about Medi-Cal, and we really want you now to, in your mental space, to add this additional resource. In the same way we often audit what's available to our young people, now we know the Callee ITC is another great public program that we can consider when we're thinking about their needs. So those are the resources, and I think with that we are going to turn it over to the group, and we are going to have some people join us for the Q&A, specifically Tricia Conti-Luke from the California Department of Community Services and Development. We are going to keep working on the audio, so I'm going to send a question on over to Eileen while I try and figure out that audio. So Eileen, the first question, well, actually I'm going to say the first question over to you, Jason. We've gotten a number of questions, people who are working specifically with parenting youth, and they want to know if they've missed the California EITC and the federal EITC, which is sizable. Can they get it for past years, or has that water just gone under the bridge and it's just too late? If you could address that, I think that's on a lot of people's minds.
Sure. No, that's actually a question that we get quite often, because people are just learning about the credit. And if you don't know about Kali ITC or federal EITC, that's okay. People are still just learning about it. To answer your question, you can go back to past years to amend past returns to claim Kali ITC. Kali ITC has only been around, this is a fourth season. You can go back, I believe, 3 years and amend. So if you didn't claim it in your 2017 return, you can go back and amend your return. Fairly easy to do, and it can pay off in a big way. Same goes for the federal as well. You can amend those past returns and go ahead and claim the credit.
Thank you very much. I know I spoke to a former foster youth who became a parent at age 19. She was 23. I mean, when you go back and do that for a couple of years, you're looking at some real financial support. And so I was really strongly encouraging her to do that. It's not something you can just do overnight, but it's definitely worth the effort. So I'm really excited. Oh, go ahead.
You're absolutely right. At the volunteer income tax assistance sites that we do have people come in to get, some of the sites will do prior year returns and so for instance, if they didn't even file. So we get a lot of people that haven't filed for years, and they're worried. And they can come into Vita sites, and some will do past returns. So it can be a matter of amending a past return, or if you didn't get around to filing in past years, you can catch up. And many Vita sites will offer help with that. Great,
thank you. I'm delighted to say we have figured out the audio, and we do have Tricia Conti-Luke from the California Department of Community Services and Development. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. We really appreciate it. And a question we have for you, if you could tell us a little bit about the department's Callee ITC education and outreach efforts. I know you have Vita buses. I'm sure people would be very interested in hearing about that. So if you could tell us a little bit about those, Tricia.
Yes, good morning, Amy. Thank you very much. Well, through a competitive process, CSD engages established organizations that maintain an existing relationship and community presence. They demonstrate extensive experience conducting similar outreach campaigns and regularly engage culturally diverse, hard-to-reach populations. Our grantees conduct the education and outreach activities in a linguistically appropriate manner that effectively meet the needs of the target population and communities they serve. Through this competitive process, CSD awarded contracts to 12 grantees in 16 target areas for education and outreach. The buses that you mentioned, the VITA buses, those are actually sponsored through the Franchise Tax Board, and Jason may want to speak more about them. They are free to the grantees to use. There is a reservation process, and I know that if you contact the Franchise Tax Board, you can get on that list to reserve the bus. They're fully equipped with computers. The only thing that the VITA organization needs to provide is the tax preparers.
Thank you very much. I'm going to do a follow-up question there if I could, Tricia. So a great question that came through. Someone asked, has there been any collaboration between VITA sites and youth shelters or other organizations that focus on TAY? So is the idea that each of the grantees are doing special outreach to TAY, or how are TAY being considered? And do you have any recommendations for collaboration for organizations that are on the web seminar today? How should they interface with your grantees?
So the best way would be to contact CSD and let me know the target area in which the individual is interested in receiving services, and that grantee would specifically be able to let you know what their organization can provide to this age population. All of our grantees are very unique into the populations which they conduct outreach. And they're in very specific target areas throughout California, and there's a statewide grantee and a rural grantee. So they do reach all corners of the state. Their organizations are very specific to certain populations, and I would be more than happy to provide the information on our grantees to individuals that are interested in learning about the specific population to which they serve.
Thank you very much. And I believe, Tricia, that you are with Susan. I want to hand it over to you, Susan. I'm so glad you're with us now, and I really appreciate the materials you put together to give you the opportunity to highlight anything you'd like to say about the integration with TAY services, anything that you would like to share with the audience.
Thank you, Amy. So I just want to mention that the Child and Family Team meetings, or any of the meetings that are held for transition-age youth, can be an excellent opportunity to provide information on the EITC, not just to the youth, but it's also a good time to provide it to their support person, so that those people then in turn can remind the youth or help them get their paperwork together, as well as other professionals who may not be familiar with it. And then just want to emphasize again, in terms of integrating it into the ILP curriculum, financial literacy is a core service of the independent living program, and as Xavier mentioned, and we've also been hearing from other youth around the state, that getting information or help with filing taxes is one of the things that's missing from a lot of programs, and that youth really want that information. So, having workshops, perhaps maybe facilitated by a VITA volunteer, could be a great way to provide that information on helping them learn how to file their taxes, and then how to claim the the EITC. So, one of the main goals for youth in their ability to live independently is developing an overall financial management plan, and so we really think that this can be a really valuable part of that plan, especially as it can help provide income. So, and that's really all I had to add.
Well, thank you very much. Next question I am going to ask you, Jason, and this has to do, it's an amalgamation of a few different questions. Several people are noting that, the legal requirement to file taxes is often low. I mean, to qualify for the EITC, you probably are not legally required to file taxes. So I guess what we're really saying is encouraging people, even though they're not legally required, even though they don't meet the income threshold, to file nonetheless because of the EITC, both state and federal, and because of the opportunity for a refund. And so is that kind of the message you're spreading from the California Franchise Tax Board?
That's exactly right, and actually you hit it right on the head. We've been doing outreach to promote the Kali ITC and the federal earned income tax credit over the past 4 tax seasons. And when we meet as a group, the coalition that's promoting the credit, both credits, we realized early on that one of our biggest challenges is reaching people who don't know about taxes and who have no filing requirement and who may, frankly, for one reason or another, be afraid to file. So what we've been doing is going out in the community, speaking to whoever would listen, and that's what's such a great thing about this webinar is reaching an additional groups. Is we want people, even if they have no filing requirement, to consider filing. If you don't file, you can be leaving money on the table. And it's not just the EITCs, the state and federal, but also refunds. One of the scenarios mentioned a youth who had worked part-time. That youth, she might have had that income, a part-time job. Chances are she had withholding. It's good for her to go ahead and file, not only for Callee ITC, but for the refund that she could be having coming from her withholding. It's really overall about literacy, I think Xavier mentioned this whole idea of what are taxes. It even comes down to that. We're just trying to get the word out. If you have any income, consider filing, because there are benefits to it, both getting your refund and claiming both the state and federal EITC. So you really hit it on the head. The groups that we were trying to reach have usually no reason to do business with FTB or IRS by law, but there are things out there to help them pay the bills and rent and tuition and things like that if they don't file, they can't receive. So you really hit it on the head.
Okay, here's a question for you, Eileen. We'll tick through a few more of these, and any ones we are not able to address, we will follow up and answer in a FAQ. Would a youth in THP plus foster care, so a non-minor dependent, have to claim the allowance they receive from the provider as income?
Hi. So that allowance is not considered taxable income, and that's something that's really important. We want to make sure that any allowance that people are receiving when in THP payments are not considered taxable income.
Another question, and maybe I'll send this one. Let's see, over to you, Jason, is if a young person is eligible for the federal and the state EITC, should they prepare these at the same time?
Okay, so it's a question about filing returns, it sounds like. And basically, if you're using software, you will enter your information and the software will prepare your federal return generally first. And then there's usually a button that says, would you like to file your California return? And you hit the button and it uses some of the similar information to prepare your state return. The answer is yes, you want to go ahead and file for both. You do need information for your state return that you'd get by filing your federal return. So you do want to go ahead and file both. If you're serving a transition age youth who is maybe a little nervous about it, the whole process, sending them to a volunteer income tax assistance location is really helpful. These volunteers are just really good people, and they will walk the transition age youth through the process and educate them in the process. It is really a financial literacy effort as well as getting your taxes done. And so you do want to file both at the same time. If people are nervous about it, VITA is a great way to go to overcome to answer any questions.
Thank you. A question several of you wrote in is, was the cash checking at Walmart, and wanting to know if there is a fee for that.
So there is a small fee for cashing a check at Walmart. If the check is up to $7,500, so $7,500 or below, then it only costs $3 to cash that check. That small fee is lower than if you bring a check to some sort of bank or another place to cash the check. So there is a fee if you bring your tax refund check to Walmart, but it is lower than the alternatives.
Another question we received was about tax preparation services, for-profit tax preparation services, and if that's something they should consider. And So why don't I hand it back over to you, Eileen, and you can answer that.
Those alternatives are certainly out there, but there are so many wonderful not-for-profit tax preparation services. Again, VITA really is a great place to go in order to file your taxes. They can help with both state and federal taxes, and so we would really encourage you to find one of those 1,000 different VITA sites throughout the state over the for-profit tax filing assistance services.
And, you know, often what I'd add to that is low-income people are marketed to for those services. So it can seem very easy and very convenient, and becoming informed about what's available free of charge for young people is really important, because if their return is only $250 and they're paying $75 for a tax preparation service that's totally unnecessary, while we're still happy they're going to get something, they're not getting what they're fully entitled to. Next question, Jason, for you is: can a transition age youth file with as little as $1,000 income?
You can go ahead and file if you have any income, and you just need that basically $1 of income, and you know, there could be a chance that even with that small amount they could be eligible for some form of credit, or depending if it was if they had a job where they had withholding, they could get a refund as well. So no matter how low, you might want to consider filing, and especially that's where it really pays off to go to a VITA site. They can look at help you out for free through the process. And if you're in that situation, again, for everyone, every dollar counts. But in a case like that, a VITA site would probably be a great option.
All right. I think we'll do 2 more questions and then wrap it up. The next one is about the infant supplement, the $900 infant supplement. That's a supplementary payment that goes to youth in foster care who are custodial parents. And a person wants to know, is that considered taxable income?
That infant supplement is not considered taxable income. Just like stipends that are paid to youth that are in foster care, infant supplements are not considered taxable income.
All right, and Tricia, why don't I send this last one over to you. People want to know how they can get information about the 12 grantees that you mentioned.
Thank you. The best way to get information is to contact CSD. I have a handout. I have the target areas with the grantees listed. I have for both education and outreach and for free tax preparation assistance services. So really, we can put you in contact with these organizations. Most of them are nonprofit or community organizations, and they would be more than happy to speak with anybody interested in, number 1, learning more information, or number 2, trying to find a VITA site that can prepare their taxes. So you can contact me.
Thank you very much. And go ahead.
That's okay. I was just going to give you my contact information, but I'll go ahead and forward that information to you, Amy, and then you can disseminate it to your webinar participants.
Great. Thank you very much. It's on the Q&A portion here, and then you also very generously sent us some slides with the contact information, so we will include that in the follow-up materials that go out to everyone. So that concludes today's web seminar. I want to thank everyone, all of our presenters who shared a lot of great information, and want to thank all of you for being on today's web seminar. And now we can really get out there and start these conversations with transition age youth in California and help them access the California Earned Income Tax Credit. So thank you again, and have a good day.